Do you remember the laughter, the muddy faces, and the pure joy of the Little Rascals? For decades, these kids were America's best friends, but behind the scenes, a dark curse was waiting to strike. Today, none of them are still with us. Join us as we uncover their shocking stories and honor the legacies they left behind. Carl Alfalfa Switzer as Alfalfa. Carl Alfalfa Switzer was born on August 7, 1927, in Paris, Illinois, USA. At 8 years old, he played Alfalfa, the squeaky-voiced, cowlick-haired romantic singer in The Little Rascals. His off-key serenades and stubborn confidence quickly turned Alfalfa into one of the most unforgettable characters in the series, even surpassing Spanky in popularity by the late 1930s. That sudden fame followed him straight into a turbulent marriage. In 1954, Switzer married Diantha Collingwood, a wealthy grain empire heiress, after only a few months of dating in Las Vegas. At first, it looked like a rescue story. The former child star finally had money, stability, and a son, Justin Lance Collingwood Switzer. But the marriage cracked quickly. By 1957, the marriage collapsed into divorce, and the once famous Alfalfa was suddenly a struggling man trying to survive through odd jobs, dog training, and hunting guide work for clients like Roy Rogers and James Stewart. Then the trouble turned violent. In January 1958, Switzer was shot in the arm by an unknown gunman while sitting in his car outside a bar, an attack that was never solved. Months later, he was arrested in Sequoia National Forest for illegally cutting down 15 pine trees to sell as Christmas trees, leaving him on probation and deeper in financial trouble. The former child star who once made America laugh in The Human Comedy and The Ten Commandments now looked like a man sliding toward disaster. The end came brutally. On January 21, 1959, Switzer confronted his former friend Moses "Bud" Stilts over a small debt connected to a hunting dog reward, reportedly only about $50. The argument exploded into a violent struggle inside Stilts's home in Mission Hills. Moments later, Stilts fired a .38 revolver, the bullet tearing through Switzer's groin and rupturing a major artery. Carl Alfalfa Switzer was pronounced dead at the hospital at 7:27 p.m., age 31. Authorities ruled the shooting self-defense, though witnesses later questioned that conclusion. He was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, his gravestone engraved with a Masonic symbol and a hunting dog. At the time of his death, the once-beloved child star's net worth was essentially zero. George Spanky McFarland as Spanky. George Spanky McFarland was born on October 2, 1928, in Dallas, Texas, USA. At just 3 years old, he played Spanky, the sharp-tongued, confident leader of the kids in The Little Rascals. The character's quick wit and bossy charm helped shape the spirit of the series and made Spanky one of the most recognizable child stars of the 1930s. That early fame followed him into adulthood and into his marriages. McFarland first married Paula Jean Wilkinson on August 1, 1949, hoping to build a stable life away from Hollywood. Yet the shadow of Spanky never left him. Friends later said he often felt trapped by the role that had made him famous, even while fans still adored him from classics like General Spanky and the Our Gang Short Beginner's Luck. After that marriage collapsed, he married Doris, with whom he had 3 children. But the pressure of being remembered only as a childhood character continued to haunt his personal life. The deeper struggle came quietly through his health and emotional strain. Former colleagues described periods when McFarland appeared exhausted and withdrawn. During reunion events celebrating Our Gang, including appearances recalling bedtime worries, he often joked about his past. Yet the humor masked a lingering tension from decades of trying to outrun the Spanky image that defined him. George Spanky McFarland died on June 30, 1993, at his home in Grapevine, Texas, after suffering a heart attack at the age of 64. His body was cremated soon afterward, and a cenotaph approved for the Texas State Cemetery in Austin was planned to honor the beloved child star, though it remained uninstalled for years. At the time of his death, McFarland's estimated net worth was about $500,000. Billy Thomas as Buckwheat. Billy Thomas was born on March 12, 1931, in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 4 years old, he played Buckwheat, the shy boy with the unforgettable voice and hair in the Little Rascals. The character quickly became one of the most talked-about figures in the series, yet behind the laughter was a life marked by isolation. Thomas later married and had one child, but the marriage ended in divorce as he struggled to rebuild a normal life outside the fame of Buckwheat. While fans still recognized him from beloved shorts, he deliberately turned away from acting after appearing in productions tied to the Our Gang legacy. Years later, troubling stories from the old studio days resurfaced. Some former crew members claimed that during the filming of The Little Rascals, the young actor had occasionally been given syrups containing mild sedatives so he would remain still during long takes. Though never officially confirmed, the rumor followed Thomas for years, and people close to him said he sometimes struggled with hand tremors and nervous tension as an adult. During this time, he had already moved behind the scenes of the industry, working at Technicolor, quietly staying connected to the world that had once made him famous. Billy Thomas died suddenly on October 10, 1980, at his Los Angeles home after suffering a heart attack at the age of 49. Only 10 weeks earlier, he had stood on stage at a Hollywood gathering honoring the Our Gang cast and received a powerful standing ovation that moved him to tears. He was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery in California, leaving behind an estimated net worth of about $150,000. Matthew Stybeard as Stymie. Matthew Stybeard was born on January 1, 1925, near Los Angeles, California, USA. At 5 years old, he played Stymie, the smooth-talking kid with the oversized derby hat in The Little Rascals. His quick wit and calm confidence made him one of the smartest characters in the gang. But the bright child star carried heavy pressure at home. Beard's paychecks supported a huge family of 13 siblings, and success came with tension and constant expectations. As he grew older, the roles shrank. After appearing in films like Captain Blood, Jezebel, and The Return of Frank James, Hollywood slowly closed its doors to him. Around this time, he married Annie, hoping for stability. Yet the stress of fading fame and financial pressure pushed him into a darker path. The collapse came through addiction. As a teenager, Beard drifted into street life and was arrested for theft to support a growing marijuana habit, which soon turned into a severe heroin addiction. He spent years moving in and out of jail, his life unraveling while the world still remembered the smiling boy from Our Gang. Eventually, he entered Synanon, a controversial rehabilitation program in Los Angeles, where he finally broke his heroin addiction. Remarkably, Beard slowly rebuilt his life, appearing again in television shows such as Sanford and Son, Good Times, and later the film The Buddy Holly Story in 1978. On January 3, 1981, just 2 days after his 56th birthday, Beard suffered a stroke, fell down a staircase, and sustained serious head injuries. He died days later on January 8, 1981, from pneumonia complications at the age of 56. He was buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Los Angeles, with the legendary derby hat placed beside him. Despite the chaos of addiction and prison years, Beard left behind an estimated net worth of around $300,000. Darla Hood as Darla Hood was born on November 8, 1931, in Leedy, Oklahoma, USA. At 4 years old, she played Darla, the pretty, flirtatious girl at the center of the boys' crushes in The Little Rascals. Her sweetness, confidence, and songs gave the series a softer spark, and her chemistry with Alfalfa became one of the most memorable threads in the franchise. That image followed her into marriage, and it did not make life easier. Darla first married Robert W. Decker in 1949, but the marriage ended in 1957 as she tried to hold together adulthood, motherhood, and the old pressure of always looking perfect. She then married Jose Granson in 1957, and they had 3 children. Yet even that home was touched by strain because Jose later used a wheelchair after a stroke. While Darla kept singing in nightclubs and on television, people close to her said she stayed deeply anxious about beauty, weight, and the image the public expected her to preserve. That private pressure turned darker with time. Rumors long circulated that Darla had been pushed hard from childhood to stay tiny and polished, and later stories claimed that her obsession with appearance grew into severe eating issues and dependence on diet pills. Nothing about her final years looked tragic from the outside. She was still working, still remembered, still preparing the next Little Rascals reunion, but her body may have been far more fragile than people realized. Then came the ending no one expected. While organizing the 1980 Little Rascals reunion, Darla underwent an appendectomy at Canoga Park Hospital and died on June 13, 1979, at just 47 years old. The official cause was heart failure after hepatitis from a contaminated blood transfusion during the operation, a shocking chain of events that turned routine surgery into tragedy. Her funeral was held on June 18th, attended by family, friends, and former Our Gang cast members, and the loss stunned those who knew her. At the time of her death, Darla Hood's estimated net worth was around $500,000. Norman Chubby Cheney as Chubby. Norman Chubby Cheney was born on October 18, 1914, in Cambridge, Maryland, USA. At 14 years old, he played Chubby, the heavy-set, slow-burning boy whose frustrated expression became one of the funniest trademarks in the Little Rascals. His size, timing, and sweet comic presence gave the series a different kind of energy. Yet the role that made him memorable also trapped him inside a cruel image. Chubby never had the glamorous adult life other child stars hoped for. He left the series while still very young, never married, and never got the chance to build a family story of his own. What stayed with him was the burden of being remembered for his body first and his talent second. Then his body turned against him in a frightening way. Cheney kept gaining weight even with a normal diet and regular exercise, eventually reaching more than 300 pounds while never growing beyond 4 feet 7 inches. Doctors later discovered a glandular illness, but by then the damage was already severe. Dark stories later circulated that people around the production had encouraged the image that made him funny on screen, even as his health worsened. In 1935, treatment at Johns Hopkins caused his weight to crash from over 300 pounds to under 140. But that sudden drop placed enormous strain on his body and pushed him into a final medical collapse. Norman Chubby Cheney died on May 29, 1936, from myocarditis, at just 21 years old. He was buried in Baltimore Cemetery in Maryland, but the heartbreak did not end there. His grave remained unmarked for 76 years because his mother could not afford a headstone. Only in 2012 were black granite markers finally placed for both him and his mother after a fundraising effort. For a boy whose face was known across America, his financial legacy was devastatingly small, with an estimated net worth of under $5,000. Jackie Cooper as Jackie. Jackie Cooper was born on September 15, 1922, in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 7 years old, he played Jackie, the spirited, emotional little boy in the Little Rascals. His natural screen presence was so strong that he quickly became one of the standout children in the series. But the child at the center of that success was carrying damage early. His father abandoned the family when Jackie was still very young, and the adults around him pushed him through a brutal Hollywood machine that prized tears, obedience, and profit. He later married June Horn in 1944 and had a son, but that marriage ended in 1949. A second marriage to Hildy Parks lasted only from 1950 to 1951. He finally found longer stability with Barbara Ray Krause, whom he married in 1954, and they had 3 children, yet even that chapter was marked by later heartbreak. The wound from childhood never fully disappeared. Cooper later revealed one of the most chilling moments of his early career. To force real tears from him on the set of Skippy, director Norman Taurog staged a fake threat that Jackie's dog had been shot. The trick worked, but it left a scar that lasted far longer than the scene. In later years, Cooper hinted that 1930s Hollywood could be a dangerous place for child actors, full of adults who crossed lines and treated children as tools. He rarely spoke in a sensational way, yet the silence itself said a lot. Jackie Cooper died on May 3, 2011 in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 88. By the time he died, Cooper had built an estimated net worth of about $18 million, far beyond most former child stars, yet his story still carried a bitter truth. The little boy who made audiences laugh and cry spent the rest of his life proving he was more than what Hollywood did to him. Billy Froggy Laughlin, as Froggy Billy Froggy Laughlin, was born on July 5, 1932 in San Gabriel, California, USA. At 8 years old, he played Froggy, the raspy-voiced, odd little comic whose croaking delivery made him one of the strangest and most memorable kids in the Little Rascals. That voice gave the series a fresh spark in its final years. Unlike many child stars, Billy never married, had no children, and, by most accounts, remained a quiet, decent boy away from the camera. That is what makes his story hit harder. After Our Gang ended, he did not chase fame with desperation. He tried a few auditions, appeared briefly in Johnny Doesn't Live Here Anymore, then told his mother he was not interested in forcing a film career that no longer felt like his future. But one detail kept haunting his image: that voice. Officially, Froggy's strange sound came from Billy's own performance style, based on an imitation he used for fun. Still, disturbing rumors later claimed the studio pushed him to strain it further, making him shout until it sounded rougher and more bizarre for comic effect. Whether true or not, the story fits the cruelty often hidden behind child stardom. On August 31, 1948, Billy Laughlin died after a road accident in La Puente, California. He had been riding as a passenger on a motor scooter during a newspaper delivery when the scooter turned into the path of a speeding truck. Billy suffered fatal injuries and died in the hospital about 6 hours later at only 16 years old. He was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park Cemetery in Whittier, California, beside his parents. His life ended so early that there was no real fortune to leave behind. Bobby Weezer Hutchins, as Weezer Robert Bobby Hutchins, was born on March 29, 1925, in Tacoma, Washington, USA. At 2 years old, he played Weezer, the eager little tag-along brother always desperate to join the adventures in the Little Rascals. His energetic presence and childlike excitement made him a familiar face throughout the late silent and early sound era of the series. But behind the cheerful character was a deeply troubled home. Bobby never married and never built a family of his own, and many people later pointed to the shadow of his childhood as the reason. Fellow actor Jackie Cooper once remembered how Weezer's father constantly pulled him away from the other children on set, isolating him in a harsh attempt to turn him into a bigger star. Disturbing stories later suggested that the boy was deliberately underfed to keep him small and marketable, a cruel strategy that left him frail and socially withdrawn even as he appeared in beloved films like Big Ears and Pups is Pups. The emotional scars lingered long after the cameras stopped. Rumors circulated that Hutchins developed severe claustrophobia, allegedly linked to punishments in which he was locked in dark spaces if he failed to memorize lines. By the time he grew into a young man, acting was already behind him. Seeking a different life, and perhaps a way to escape the memories of childhood fame, Hutchins joined the United States Army Air Forces and trained as a pilot, determined to leave the ground that held so many painful memories. Tragically, that new life ended just as it was about to begin. On May 17, 1945, while training at Merced Army Airfield in California, Hutchins's aircraft collided with another plane during a landing exercise. The crash killed him instantly at just 20 years old, only days before he was scheduled to graduate from flight school. He left behind no fortune from his early fame and virtually no recorded net worth, only the memory of the little boy called Weezer, who once chased laughter across the playgrounds of the Little Rascals. Alan Farina Hoskins as Farina. Alan Farina Hoskins was born on August 9, 1920, in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. At 2 years old, he played Farina, the wide-eyed, mischievous child with pigtails and patchwork clothes in The Little Rascals. His expressive face and natural comic instincts made him one of the most important figures in the early years of the series. Yet fame did not shield him from the darker realities of the time. Hoskins married Frances, and together they raised 2 children, but their family life unfolded far away from the Hollywood spotlight he had once known. As a child star, Farina faced a brutal climate of racial hatred that few audiences ever saw. According to long-circulated stories, the studio even assigned him a bodyguard, not to manage fans, but to protect him from racist threats that sometimes appeared near the set. Despite being one of Hal Roach's favorite actors and even earning $350 a week, a remarkable salary for a child performer of that era, his fame never fully translated into long-term security. As he grew older, the entertainment world grew colder. After serving in the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II, Hoskins returned to a Hollywood that offered little opportunity. Matters worsened in the early 1950s when his name appeared in connection with events linked to socialist and communist groups during his youth, leading to blacklisting pressures that effectively closed the door on acting. Instead of chasing fading fame, he chose a different life, eventually working in rehabilitation programs that helped young people struggling with addiction and mental illness. Alan Farina Hoskins died on July 26, 1980, in Oakland, California, after a battle with cancer at the age of 59. He was buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland, a quiet resting place far from the Hollywood sets where he had once made millions laugh. Though his childhood salary had once been among the highest in the cast, his later life was devoted more to helping others than building wealth, and his legacy remains the unforgettable image of Farina. Dorothy Dorba as Dorothy Dorba was born on March 28, 1925, in Livermore, California, USA. At 5 years old, she played Dorothy, the curly-haired, quick-witted leading girl in The Little Rascals. Her spark, sharp timing, and mischievous energy gave the series a bright jolt. That success did not protect her from a complicated adult life. Dorothy married twice and became a mother of 2, but like many former child stars, she stepped into adulthood after a childhood already shaped by pressure, routine, and performance. Even later, when Dorothy left acting behind and worked as a secretary after the glory of mush and milk had faded, the feeling that childhood had ended too early never fully disappeared. Then came the long physical decline. Rumors followed her for years that the deafening sound equipment of early talkies had left her with chronic headaches. Dorothy eventually developed emphysema, a slow and punishing illness that gradually took away the strength and ease that had once made her so lively on screen. Dorothy Dorba died on June 2, 2010, at the age of 85 in Walnut Creek, California, from emphysema. By the end of her life, her legacy mattered more than money. But what remained most clearly was the image of Dorothy, the girl with the curls, the comic bite, and the smile that made even the oldest Our Gang shorts feel alive. Scotty Beckett, as Scotty Beckett, was born on October 4, 1929, in Oakland, California, USA. At 5 years old, he played Scotty, Spanky's loyal sidekick and partner in mischief, in The Little Rascals. His crooked cap, fast reactions, and easy chemistry with the gang gave the series fresh energy. But his adult life unraveled almost as fast as it rose. Beckett married Beverly Baker in 1949, and the marriage was over within a year. He then married Sonny Vickers, had a son, Scott Jr., and lost that marriage too in 1957. His third wife, Margaret C. Sabo, stayed with him until the end, but by then the damage was already deep. Even while he was still getting work in films like Battleground and on television in Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, his drinking, gambling, arrests, and bad checks were destroying his reputation from the inside. The collapse turned brutal. Scotty was arrested again and again for drunkenness, drunk driving, drug possession, and passing bad checks, and his body paid the price, too. In 1959, he crashed his car into a tree and suffered a broken hip and skull fracture. Injuries so severe that he reportedly needed a wheelchair and crutches for the rest of his life. He attempted suicide in 1962 after a heavy drinking binge. Then came the final mystery. In May 1968, after a savage beating under unclear circumstances, Beckett checked into a Los Angeles nursing home covered in injuries. 2 days later, he was dead. Pills and a note were found, but the exact cause was never settled, which only fueled darker rumors that his ending was tied to dangerous people and unpaid debts. Scotty Beckett died on May 10, 1968, at the age of 38. He was found dead in his room at a Los Angeles nursing home after entering for treatment following that violent beating, and while reports pointed to a likely overdose involving barbiturates or alcohol, the official cause remained undetermined. He was buried at San Fernando Mission Cemetery in Mission Hills, Los Angeles. His life ended in confusion, pain, and suspicion, leaving behind one of the darkest stories in the history of the Little Rascals children. The children of the Little Rascals, Our Gang, 1922 once filled movie screens with laughter, mischief, and unforgettable moments. Which story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed discovering what happened to the cast of the Little Rascals, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into the forgotten lives of classic Hollywood legends.